spin 3 of the vinyl collection. This is kind of, I guess if I had to put a theme to this, then it would be my more underground modern stuff. I mean, there's definitely some older records in here, but this is mostly like stuff from the last 10 years or so. So looking forward to sharing this one a lot with you guys. This is Kiss the Ring by Rome Streets. This is on a really cool like highlighter yellow color, and it's number 200 of 250. This is a sleeper pick as far as 22 albums go. I think this flew under the radar for most. Obviously it's not like a super mainstream release, but definitely check this out. I'm pretty sure they even put it as like a top 20 album for 2022 on like Rolling Stone. Not that their opinion really matters or it's even that great a lot of the time, but it's still worth checking out. And if you just like the classic boom bap vibe, 90s, this is a very good modern take on that. Lots of Conductor and just Griselda production all around. I love this. This has grown on me a ton, and there's some bangers on it. And then we have another Griselda release. This is Peace Fly God, and this is by Westside Gunn, also numbered. This was released through the Dope label. It's number 25 out of 500, and it's on the highlighter yellow pressing. This is another album that's also grown on me. I'm not the hugest Westside Gunn fan. I definitely appreciate what he does, but there's only a few albums by him that I feel like I need to have. This is one of them. This is just a very good, well-produced. It feels luxury, but it's also kind of mixtapey at the same time. This is the only solo Westside Gunn album I have. Unfortunately, the resale on a lot of these is pretty expensive. I'd love to have Pray for Paris. Fly God is an awesome god. A few of the Hitler Wears Hermes series would be really cool to have. But most of them I'm not willing to pay resale on. So if I ever get rich someday, that's where my money will go. But as for now, this is kind of what I've settled with. So next up we have another Griselda pick. This one is called Pray for Haiti by Makami. And this one is another sleeper album, I think. Super great production. Of course, we're getting a lot of Conductor beats on here. It's executive produced by Westside Gunn and released through Griselda. I do really appreciate Makami and overall his contribution to hip hop the last few years. This is probably my favorite release by him. And it's the only one I can afford to have on vinyl as well, even though I did pay resale for this. So this one, the more I listen to it, the more there is to take away from it. Not only is the production great, the rapping is just phenomenal, and also, the concept or story behind it, tying in Haiti as a nation and their struggles and whatnot into the music is a great idea, and it's just very well done overall. So check this one out for sure if you haven't before. It's definitely worth your time. And then last year, this is a 2024 release. This is Across the Tracks by Boldy James and Conductor Williams. And this one feels very mixtapey, I'll admit. It's not anything that's going to blow your mind. There's a few amazingly produced songs on here. You're getting Conductor beats, so it's going to be a little bit like weird sounding, a little bit off-putting, but in the best way, in my opinion. But of course with Boldy rapping, you're going to get some crazy coke lines and just some gangster stuff. So I appreciate this one for what it is. Definitely not my favorite work from either Boldy or Conductor, but I think that this is still a very enjoyable album and fun to come back to every once in a while. So, and it's on that like bone white color that I just showed you. And then we have one of my favorites. I'll pull both of these out at the same time. But these are the Billy Woods and Kenny Siegel collabs. First one is called Hiding Places. Just right before I am making this video, I was listening to this and spinning it. And every time I come back, I remember how good the beats and production are on this. I think Billy Woods' Slow, Cold Flow works so well with Kenny Siegel's also kind of ominous and dark sounding beats. And they're very abstract, stuff you wouldn't normally hear artists rapping on, but it just works so well. And I think that their collaborations are always so unique and special whenever they come out. I did not listen to this album actually until last year. They did a re-release, and so I loved Maps when it came out in 2023, so I was like, shoot, I should check this one out, and I'm glad that I did. So I listened to it a few times, picked up the vinyl, and in the last 6 months since I got the vinyl, just listened to this very, very regularly. This is a great album, so definitely check that out. And then, even though I listened to this one first, this one actually came out in 2023, several years after the Hiding Places release. And this one is also super solid. It's hard to pick which one I like more between the two just because they're so unique and individual. But this one definitely has even more abstract and unique beats. And it's on this really cool, like bright orange. I did pay resale for this one. I should have bought it retail when it came out in 2023, but I slept on it, which was a bad idea. So, anyway, I felt like I had to have this one too. They're just both very strong albums and endlessly re-listenable. I think that these will age beautifully. In fact, Hiding Places has been out almost 6 years. It had the 5-year anniversary last year, so already I think that shows it's starting to age even better. And then this one is only a couple years old, but it's on the same par as the first, so I can't imagine it not aging as well. So next up we have Jay Electronica. So this is kind of a two-piece because I keep the albums together. But this is Jay Electronica's first album. Honestly, I forget the name of this. I will leave it up there. It's just solid white. It's hard to see on the camera, but there are like textured, words here in Arabic. Obviously, I have no idea what they're saying, but it's pretty cool. And then I believe this is on a white vinyl. Let's just pull it out and see. Yeah, it is. So, nothing too crazy here. I love Jay Electronica. Admittedly, this album is not super crazy or unique or special. There's definitely some great hits on here, but I think in comparison to what Jay Electronica is really capable of, this album is not the most impressive. But what I do think is extremely impressive by Jay Electronica is this, which is Exhibit C and Exhibit A. And these are the singles I think he originally came out with when he was first releasing music. So we've got 2 7-inches. They're on this cool little gatefold, and they are blue. I'll go ahead and pull out Exhibit C for you to see. For me personally, this is like a top 10 rap song of all time. It's just so damn good. It's really like that special and unique. And on the back of the jacket, it actually has, it's gonna be hard to see from so far away, but it does have the lyrics listed. So, I mean, you can sit here and go through while it's playing, and it's very impressive, the lyrical prowess that Jay Electronica has. So, yeah, hopefully someday we get like a real proper release from him. My understanding is, I don't know if it's just symbolic or marketing or whatever, but he says that this album was made in 40 days. And so, there's some quality on here for sure, but I want an album that's to the quality of Exhibit C. And knowing Jay Electronica, the odds of that happening are pretty low. In fact, I wouldn't count on it or bet on it, but you can always hope and wish that that's what will happen someday. So that's what I'm doing here. This is the only Jay-Z album that I have. This is the Blueprint. This is probably, I mean, it is my favorite Jay-Z album. I do like the Black Album. Reasonable Doubt is also very solid. But Reasonable Doubt, at least right now, is pretty hard to find. They're not really doing any repressings that I'm aware of, and so this is what I have. And I do think that this album has aged very, very well. It's got some great Kanye production. Of course, Jay-Z was, around his prime when this came out, and so just really great overall songs that come out of this project. So I like that one quite a bit. And in fact, I just put the CD back in my car. I've been bumping that for the last couple weeks quite a bit. So these next two, we've got 1999 by Joey Badass. This is a really impressive mixtape that came out. Oh man, it has to be like, I think 2012 when this dropped. But Joey was only like 17 years old when this originally came out, which is crazy because for the lyrical ability that he had at the time, he had a lot of potential, which I think for the most part he's lived up to. But that being said, I do think this is probably his strongest project. He took a lot of boom bap beats, some of them from other albums even, and just went to town, rapped his ass off, and it worked. And I think that just as a modern lyricist, he's definitely up there. So I appreciate this project quite a bit. It's very nostalgic. And then as a follow-up, he made 2000. This came out, I think, in 2022, 10 years later when that anniversary came out. This is just on standard black. I do really appreciate this album, and I think that there's a lot to take away from it, but I don't know that it necessarily stands up as strong as 1999, which is not, a bad thing. I think that it's still a great album, but 1999 is just very, very good. So, okay, these next two are from Pusha T. We'll start with Daytona. This was part of that Wyoming run that Kanye did back in 2018. He fully produced and executive produced this album with Pusha T. It's pretty short, maybe like 25-ish minutes or less, and it's straight heat. Every song on here is amazingly produced and also amazingly rapped on. So this is also another really nostalgic one for me, and definitely appreciate that they came out with this one when they did. This next one is It's Almost Dry. This is Pusha T's most recent release, and I also bought the CD. It came with this little insert that was signed. Nothing too crazy, but I just keep it with the vinyl because it's the vinyl, a little bit nicer. This one was co-executive produced by Pharrell and Kanye, and so you're getting kind of that old, Neptune style production from Pharrell, and then the same, soul sample Ye from the Daytona era as well. So you're getting the best of both worlds. I really appreciate this album, and I did not like it as much as Daytona when it first came out. I think the expectations were just really high, but overall, as this album has aged, I do think it is pretty solid. I still think Daytona's just slightly the better album, but this is a worthy addition to the discography, and definitely had to pick this one up as well. So appreciate both of those albums for what they are, and both on solid black. And then just coming in on the Pusha T trend, we have Clips. That's the rap duo he had with his brother No Malice. This is the VMP edition of Hell Hath No Fury. This is on 45 RPM, and it's on this real nice green color vinyl. I don't know. I love this. I believe this is fully produced by the Neptunes, so Pharrell also has some great production on this, which is just classic. This is like really great, East Coast, early 2000s coke rap, and both of them are great lyricists. And then, of course, with the amazing production, this is undoubtedly a classic. I actually kind of jumped the gun because the other one I have to show you is their first album, which is Lord Willin'. And this one also, kind of same stuff. This is on standard black, but also produced by the Neptunes. And, Pusha T, No Malice clips. Very solid. And I think that these are both very strong early 2000s coke rap classics. This is, obviously they're not the originals, but a lot of influence came from these, and I really appreciate listening to them. And as far as I know, there has been talk of Pusha T and No Malice coming back for another collab album, which I hope is true. No Malice retired about 10-15 years ago, and other than the occasional feature, he really hasn't dropped any new music. So hopefully that's true, and we get a new album from both of them together with some Neptunes cool production. That'd be awesome. This is East 1999 Eternal, and this is by Bone Thugs and Harmony. This is a Vinyl Me Please release. Super cool jacket. Honestly, one of my favorite pressings of any record, and this disc is just insane. This is one side, and then the other, we've got this really cool red and white. It's also got the original Ruthless Records sticker. It's just super cool. And then the jacket quality is insane. It's a gatefold. It's like this really thick premium cardboard. It's foil stamped. You don't get many pressings that are this high in quality from anywhere for that matter. But this is a good 90s classic. It's like a mix of kind of dirty R&B as well as some dark hip hop and horrorcore. There's a lot of death themes on this album. Of course, Eazy-E had recently passed away. He was one of their mentors, and so there's a lot of his influence on this, and his death definitely is a theme. You get songs like, this is the most popular one off the album, but The Crossroads is exactly that. Just talking about, seeing your friends and family after death and meeting with them again. So, pretty cool album. And this next one is Undone by The Roots. And I haven't gone super far into The Roots discography. There's only a couple others besides these two I'm about to show you. But Undone is a fantastic concept record. Very well produced, of course. The Roots do live production, meaning that they are playing as a band when they are recording these songs, or at least the instrumentals for them, which is really cool, and it gives a unique vibe. It's not so perfectly timed. It gives that live feeling to it. It feels a little bit raw, but in a good way. And this is really cool as an album or a concept album because we're kind of living the life of a man backwards and hearing his story and his experiences, and makes for a really unique story overall. So I appreciate this album. I don't come back to it super regularly just because it is such a unique listen, but I definitely do appreciate what they were doing there, and it is genuinely a very good concept record. This is Illadelph Half-Life, just on standard black. A lot of people consider this The Roots' best album, or at least one of them. Production on here is also insane. I love some of these beats, and I love most of them, if not all of them, but I just think that they are so unique and stand out. And I think that this goes to show, the potential that they would have so early in their career as they continue to release super solid and consistent music. As far as the Roots goes, again, I haven't dove in super deep into their discography. At some point, I'd like to get Phrenology, which is a little bit more rock inspired, and then How I Got Over. Those are both great Roots records that I would like to get at some point. And then we've got Common B. And this, to me, of course, it's Common's album, but I feel like this is an extension of Kanye as well. You get the underrated lyricism and just very thought-provoking, ideals from Common. And then you get some very nice soul samples from Kanye. This is like College Dropout, Late Registration era, and so for me, that's one of my favorite Kanye times. This is an incredible album, and I think at this point it's relatively mainstream. Most people will listen to it if you're into hip hop, but still very underrated pick in my opinion. And I believe I mentioned this, but this is on Standard Black. This next one is Deltron 3030. And I did not listen to this album until last year, 2024, I'm ashamed to say. But, this has grown on me a ton ever since I listened to it. Picked it up very shortly after I did. And I have loved this album ever since then. It's somewhat of a conceptual album. There's a lot of themes of, futurism, apocalyptic stuff, computers and viruses taking over the world. So even though, the world isn't not in such a dire circumstance as depicted here on the album, there are a lot of, relative themes and ideas that, seem like they're not too far off at the same time, unfortunately. So this album is incredibly produced. In fact, the opening song on here feels like John Williams or like one of those crazy, classic producers did it. But obviously it's rap infused. You got like the strings and all that, and it just feels so epic and hits you all at once. And when you think that you've heard it all, and it gets even crazier. And even the rest of the album, I would say, while it may not be up to that level of craziness, it still has that very strong level of production mixed with Del the Funky Homo Sapiens, underrated lyricism and whatnot. And so, again, another sleeper pick for sure. This is such a great album to listen to, and definitely recommend it if you have not checked it out or heard of it before. And we've got Third Eye Vision, Hieroglyphics, another solid underground record from the 90s. And I have loved this record for a few years now, but up until last year, I was unable to get a hold of it. They just did a repress and jumped on it as soon as I could. It's just on Standard Black, so nothing too crazy. But again, just some very conscious rapping and thought-provoking lyrics over some just, fun 90s beats. Nothing necessarily mind-blowing, but also still like relatively good production. So appreciate this record a lot. And this is just a good casual listen for me, although you can definitely have a very in-depth headphone listen, and lyrically there's so much to take away if you pay attention to what they're saying. So just very enjoyable overall. This next one is a 90s classic. We've got 3 6 Mafia, and this is Mystic Styles. This was their first official album release. I'm not super into 3 6 Mafia, nor do I know a ton of their history, but my understanding is that they were like a mixtape, cassette tape group for a while, just selling all their tapes. And this one, was kind of like the culmination of their greatest hits up to that point early on. And so they re-released a lot of the songs officially through this album. But this is like one of the early horrorcore records. It's also got that southern, Tennessee, southern, United States kind of rap. So it's very dark. Production is very grimy, and yeah, it's a lot of fun to listen to. I wasn't a huge fan of everything that came out by them, but this I feel like it's just so unique, and it was their first record that you have to check it out. It's on like this kind of like reddish purpley. It looks different in the camera, but in real life it's almost like a purpley red. And I really appreciate having this. At some point I would like to try and go a little bit more into 3 6 Mafia's discography, because a lot of people will say that they do have some more classics in there, and I'm sure that they do, but just as an overall fan of the sound, I'm not as into this as I am some of the other 90s music. We've got Run DMC's Raising Hell. This is Vinyl Me Please. This is on like a bright green disc, I think. Let's pull it out and see. Yeah, I like it. It's heavy. It's a 180. But this one's pretty cool. This is an early mainstream hip hop record, or at least one of the records that helped propel hip hop into the mainstream. I'm pretty sure this was released through Def Jam. Let's see. Maybe not. Maybe it's through Sony. But it was produced by Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin. And, there's Aerosmith on this. That was a popular 80s rock band that kind of helped, show people that rap wasn't too far off and that there was cool genre meshing and whatnot. So, classic album. I don't listen to this album a ton. I think it's more in my collection as like a classic and one of those essential classics to have, especially for hip hop, but I appreciate it for what it is and respect the hell out of it. So, next one, this is one of those albums that I grew up on in high school. I listened to this a ton. This is NWA, straight out of Compton. I'm from California, not LA or Compton area by any means, much farther north, Sacramento area, but I do think that this is a California classic through and through. It doesn't matter where you are, if you're in the Bay Area or the Valley or LA or San Diego, it doesn't matter, Fresno. This is 100% a California classic. You've got Dre production on here, which I believe this may be his first producer credit. I'm not sure, but it was at least one of them. And then you've got Ice Cube, you've got Eazy-E, two of the biggest West Coast rappers as part of this group. And I think that this was like the real start of gangster rap. Maybe there were some other records that kind of leaned towards that a little bit or brought it out, but this is the one that really set it off. And they went crazy on this. You probably know some of the history if you're familiar with this record at all, but it caused a lot of uproar, and even politicians were getting involved with what they were doing, which is nuts. Trying to censor a lot of this stuff, and this is a piece of history in my book. So, very important record, and I love it a ton. Not much more to say, but it's just super enjoyable, and it's aged flawlessly, in my opinion. And up next, we have one of my more recent favorite rappers, JID or Jid. And we'll start with this. This is The Never Story. This is just on Standard Black. And this was his first official album release after doing some mixtapes, at least that I'm aware of. I think obviously not his best, but it shows a ton of potential. There's some crazy good songs on here, and there's a lot of great production as well. We got songs produced by J. Cole, We have Earth King on this album, Black. This is a very Dreamville sounding record, of course. And yeah, I don't know, just the start of a great career. Again, this is not his best album, but it's a very solid first effort. And I think it goes to show that there was a lot more to come for JID in the years to follow. This is DiCaprio 2, the sequel to his mixtape, The DiCaprio. And it's a DJ Jama, produced or at least narrated album, so it does feel a bit mixtapey. But also released through Dreamville, so you're getting some great features on here. Of course, we've got Method Man, Joey Badass, J. Cole, BJ the Chicago Kid, A$AP Ferg, and then, again, on some pretty good beats. So I definitely appreciate this album. I think it's a great follow-up to The Never Story. But my favorite album that he's released, and in fact my favorite album of 2022, was The Forever Story. And this is just so well put together. This is very well done as a conceptual record. While I will say there's not like a through story for this, it definitely has a lot of family themes. He talks a lot about his life and how things have changed since he's become a rapper and his growth. And there's a lot of introspection as well. Not only that, but it's amazingly produced. There's just so many great beats on here. Tons of beat switches, which sometimes I feel like are overused, but in this case, it works really well. And then, of course, some great features. We have Mos Def as Yasin Bey. We've got Lil Durk, which honestly not a huge fan of him, but this is one of the features I do like from him. We've got Earth Gang. Everyone likes surround sound. That's probably the biggest hit off of this album, which I like too. Not my favorite. I think my favorite song is Cody Blue 31. But yeah, this is just an amazing album, and I think JID deserves to be in that top 3 conversation, honestly. Maybe his discography is the only thing holding him back, since he doesn't quite have as many releases as Drake or Kendrick or J. Cole, but I think his catalog is getting to that standard of quality, and so I think it's time to start considering him in that conversation. This is probably one of my favorite parts of my collection. This is my Alchemist collabs. We'll start with this one. This is Voidzir, I believe is how it's pronounced. I think that's French. This is Earl Sweatshirt in The Alchemist. I was not into the lore of this album before it came out. Honestly, I kind of jumped on when it got released, but my understanding is that this album was leaked, or some of the songs of it were leaked a long time ago, and those leaks have been floating around. People have been asking for an Alchemist and Earl Sweatshirt collab, and they finally released it. And I don't think it's either of their best works, but you're always going to get some damn good production from Alchemist and some pretty good lyricism and rapping from Earl. So it's still a solid project. I appreciate it quite a bit, and this is just on standard black. This is probably one of my favorite Alchemist collabs, or I guess 2 of them. The first one we'll start with is Price of Tea in China, and this is Boldy James and The Alchemist. This came out in 2020. I did not really listen to this until last year, so I was missing out for a long time. But of course, production on this is incredible. Boldy 2 was hungry on this one and just brought a lot to the table. I think that this was one of those lightning in a bottle moments as far as like producer rapper collabs go, and I love this project. I don't know if I like this one as much as the next one. I can't decide which one's my favorite, but this one is Bo Jackson by Boldy James in The Alchemist. This one seems to be a little bit more abstract in terms of the beats and production, and a little bit less conceptual. Neither of them are really concept albums, but this one's a little bit more all over. But I think the highs are just slightly higher on this one, and so hard to decide which one I like more. But honestly, back-to-back hits from Boldy and The Alchemist. And what I don't have in my collection, but I would love, is Super Tecmo Bow. But those are just a little bit pricey. I've been waiting for a good deal. Hopefully at some point I can get my hands on a copy, or it gets re-released, which probably unlikely, but we'll see what happens. But both of these are on standard black. And then this is one of the more recent Alchemist releases. But we have West Side Gun, Conway the Machine. This is Hall & Nash 2. I honestly did not listen to Hall & Nash 1. The reason why I tried this album out was because it was produced by The Alchemist. Glad I did though. It's pretty solid, very enjoyable album. It's short. It feels a bit like a mixtape, or just like an EP, just the way that the songs are done. But still appreciate it. It's great production nonetheless, and it just feels like a good, solid underground project, which is what I like. So this next one is another favorite of mine in the Alchemist collection, and this is Haram. Hopefully YouTube doesn't get me in trouble for this, because the album cover is a little crazy. This is on 180 black, but Haram is just a very great example of some really weird abstract beats. Arm & Hammer are composed of Billy Woods and Elucid. And so, you're going to get some unique rapping styles from both of them on top of like the abstract experimental alch beats. It's crazy and super solid album. This is another one with The Alchemist. This is Damogenesis and The Alchemist No Idols. And this one is like a 2013 mixtape, but they did release it as a vinyl a couple years ago. This is on standard black. I love the production on this. It's much more like guitar riff samples, and it's definitely like a stoner album kind of mixtape, which works very well for Damo and The Alchemist. And so, yeah, it's fun to listen to. I don't think that Damo has the lyricism that some of these other collaborators have, but nonetheless, this is a really enjoyable mixtape. It reminds me of like that early 2010s kind of style and vibe, but with Alchemist production, so super enjoyable. And then speaking of stoner music, we have Currency and Alchemist. This is Continuance. This is more recent. I believe this came out in like 2022 or around there. But again, just some good stoner beats. Currency has a very slow and I don't know, it's just a slower flow for sure. And it did take me a little bit to get used to his style of rapping. I didn't love it right away. But over these beats that The Alchemist made, I think that he sounds great. And it's grown on me a ton. This is a good summer album. Again, like Windows Down, just kind of relaxed, slow, stoner rap. So appreciate this a lot. And even though it's not my favorite from the collection, I do think it's underrated. And the vast majority of the community, I think, even though they appreciate that album, I don't think that they appreciate it as much as I do. And yeah, this one is a great 2023 record, Larry June and The Alchemist, The Escape on black. I'm not gonna pull out the record just because it's black, but I do want to commend whoever was in charge of creating the jacket, because they have this real nice, like matte, thick cardboard pressing, so super neat. Not the biggest fan of Larry June. In fact, most of his other music I don't listen to a ton. But this album, I think maybe it's the Alchemist production, but I also think his lyricism is a little bit more fine-tuned on here. This album talks a lot about Larry June's success and his accomplishments, and in a lot of ways it's motivational as well. And this one's also grown on me a ton. This has become like a great cleaning music album for me. I like to put this on when I'm like doing dishes or something. But it's just a solid pick. This was one of my top probably 10 albums for 2023, and I go back to this one still quite often, as I do for a lot of the Alchemist collabs that I have. So check this one out if you haven't. This next one is another favorite of mine. I know I keep saying that, but I really do mean it on this one. This is the Elephant Man's Bones with Rock Marciano and the Alchemist. This is the Alk Edition, which is basically a deluxe as far as I'm aware. It has the OBE strip, the Japanese, which is really cool. This is the back side. And then we got a limited pressing. This is number 95 of 300. It's down here at the OB strip. I don't know how well it's going to register on camera. I did get this for retail price, but I bought it as a resale. I don't know if the seller just didn't know what they were doing, but I paid 75 bucks with free shipping on eBay. And when this was released, it was like 80 bucks plus shipping. So, I don't know why they put it up so cheap, but when I saw this, I had to get it. So it's on this like white with black and pink splatter, which looks super cool and it sounds great too. If it'll go back in. It also came with like a signed insert, which I'll show you here in just a second. So I feel like I scored big time on this one. And this is like it's not that special as far as record collections go, but this is one of my personal grails. So it's pretty sweet to have that signed by both of them and to have, one of the Obi strip cool pressings. Well, let's talk about the album for a second. Super well produced. Rock Marciano definitely has one of those unique flows. Very good lyricism and just crazy bars. He's talking about coke and drug dealing and luxury, that kind of stuff, which is cool and all. But I think he also has like some great double entendres and things that are very easily missed just off of a casual listen. So as I've gone back to this album, I've realized how layered some of the beats are on here, as well as how layered some of the lyrics are from Rock Marciano. And they just recently, a few weeks ago or a month ago, released the Skeleton Key, another collab between them two. And definitely going to pick that one up on vinyl. I have not sat with that one as long as I have this one, so I can't say I like one over the other better, but definitely both very solid albums from them, and hopefully I can pick that one up sooner than later. And now, getting close to the end, this is Faith is a Rock. This is Wiki and Mike with Alchemist. This is a yellow pressing, just on like this nice clear highlighter yellow. This one I do like quite a bit, but I don't listen to it as much as some of the other Alchemist collaborations on here. It's definitely unique, has a really cool sound to it. There's a few beats that are like much more kind of mellow sounding. Of course, Wiki and Mike are pretty solid lyricists. you mix that with the Alchemist production, I think it's solid, but I just don't know that it stands up to some of the other albums that he's released with other collaborators. This one's numbered 498 out of 700. Again, I don't know how well you're going to see that in the camera. But yeah, appreciate having this one in my collection. I think I'm at the point where for most of the Alchemist releases, I'm probably going to buy it, even if I'm not huge on the album, because they're hard to get later on. If you buy it off the drop, you have a record that builds in value, and I do notice that a lot of the albums that Alchemist releases end up being growers for me. The more I go back to them, the more I appreciate them. So it's a bit of an investment, but I still appreciate it for what it is. This, I think, of all my favorite collaborations with the Alchemist, is my most favorite. And this was actually the first one I listened to. This is Alfredo. Yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about this because this is probably one of his more mainstream releases. But talk about like front to back, perfect production, perfect rapping, and just the marriage of those two makes for a perfect album. This came out in 2020. I listened to it a couple years after it released for the first time, and it's stayed in my rotation regularly ever since. I have the CD in my car, and I listen to it pretty often. Yeah, it's great. If you have not listened to Alfredo, do it. It's so good. Freddie Gibbs is a great rapper, and Alchemist gives him some of the best beats to work with. Getting into the Freddie collection though, got a few albums here. We have, first off, Soul Sold Separately, and this is his 2022 release. I don't go back to this one a ton. I think I liked it a little bit more when it originally came out, but still some super good stuff on here. Of course, there's a few Alch beats and Madlib beats. Actually, maybe only one Alch beat, but they're both on here. I think this was a little bit more, commercially marketed, I would say. There's a lot of features on this album. But, it's standard Freddie. There's nothing necessarily bad, but when you compare it to Alfredo and Bandana and Pinata, I don't really think it holds a candle to those. So, next up we do have Bandana. This was the second collaboration with Madlib. I think this came out in 2019. So, it's about 5-6 years old at the time of this recording, and I do love this album quite a bit. It has been a grower for me. I listened to Pinata first, liked that one quite a bit, and this one, when I listened to it, I wasn't as big of a fan of the production, which when you're listening to a Madlib record, that's one of the big things that you're hoping for and looking for. But as I've gone back to this more and more over time, I've appreciated it a lot more. There's tons of layered production. I don't think it's quite as wacky or zany as some of the other Madlib produced albums, but it's still a very solid album. And I think it's arguable that this could age as a classic, if it's not considered one already. So, and then we have the first collaboration by Freddie Gibbs and Madlib, Pinata. And this is the 10th anniversary edition. It came out for Record Store Day earlier last year. And it's on like this really cool, clear green and white and black splatter. That's probably one of my favorite pressings in my collection. Great album, of course. And I do also have the original cover here in my collection. I'll get that out in just a moment. But because of this pressing, I like this one a little bit more. The other one's just on standard black. So, but yeah, super strong album. This one definitely has the much more Mad Lib feeling to it. And then of course, you know, Freddie's rapping his ass off, so that's always great. And this one for sure has aged as a 2010s classic, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. It's been good since it came out, and it continues to be good now. So here we have another favorite, and this is, actually, hold on, I'll just show you real quickly. The original cover, I'll just flash it. Nothing too crazy. I think we've all seen it at this point, but yeah. This is Danger Mouse and Black Dot cheat codes. This was a great 2022 album, or maybe it was 2021. At this point, I can't remember, but yeah, there's a lot of really great cuts off of this, and this was one of the first posthumous Doom verses released, which was crazy, and you know, it's still relatively soon after his death, within a year or two of his passing, that this album was released. And so I think, you know, for me at least, and probably others, you know, that verse is a little bit, I wouldn't say quite emotional, but it's definitely very like weird and, you know, uncomfortable. But, you know, I love the verse at the same time. Production on this is pretty nuts. I think Black Dot's lyricism is always on par, but, you know, mixed with these beats, you get a really cool album. So appreciate that one a lot. I love Aquamarine. The one with Joey Badass is good. And then Strangers with A$AP Rocky and Run the Jewels. Saltwater with Conway is also very good. Just great project. And I need to go back to this more often. I don't know why. You know, it's not for lack of quality. I think this is aging well, but I just don't listen to this as much as I should. So kind of a sleeper pick, but need to check that one out a little bit more. I'll go ahead and move this just a little bit closer, and then let's check out the next few. These are my Lupe records. So we'll start with the first one that came out. This is Food and Liquor, and this was his debut album. I want to say this came out in 04, 05, 06, sometime around there. But Lupe is very underrated lyricist. This is the Vinyl Me Please edition. So it's on like this yellow, white, and like magenta purple color pressing. Super nice. I don't know if I love what they did with the cover. It's like really cool that it's metallic and shiny, but it's also kind of hard to see the cover. It looks a little bit dark in person. But yeah, this album is the start of a fantastic career, I would say. Lupe has never been like a hugely mainstream rapper or popular rapper. I think especially in more recent years, you know, his albums tend to go a little bit more under the radar, especially, you know, Samurai and Drill Music and Zion. But I think that there's still so much good quality there, and they end up being great records. Admittedly, I have not gone through all of Lupe's discography. For the most part, the albums here are what I've listened to. But this is Drill Music and Zion. This came out in 2022. This is a lot of commentary on like violence and hip hop, specifically, you know, with drill music, and which is popular in like New York and Chicago mainly. But still a super solid album. I appreciate it quite a bit. I don't return to it very often, but I like it. And then his most recent release, this is Samurai, which came out in 2024. And And initially, I was not super blown away by this project. In fact, even though I knew about it, I didn't really listen to it until a few months ago. But when I did listen to it, it's a short project. It's like 30 minutes, and I was probably listening to this like a couple times a week at least. And it's very entertaining. I think that he's got some great hooks on a few of these songs that are, borderline infectious. They get stuck in your head. But when you combine that with great lyricism and some very good production, it's pretty solid. And I forget the name of the producer on here, but let's see if we can find it. I feel like it's got to be on here. Yeah, let's see. Produced by Soundtrack. That's what it is. He fully produced this album, from what I can see. He's on every song. So I think it's cool that he worked with the producer and like nailed the vibe and aesthetic of the sound sonically. And so, yeah, just very consistent album. It's short, sweet, to the point. And it's loosely based on a phone call that Amy Winehouse had. She's like describing a dream or something that she had become this battle rapper and was just tearing people up. And Lupe took that idea and turned it into an album. And so there is that level of conceptualism. I don't think it's like super straight through as a story, but it is kind of like a cool, loosely based concept idea to make an album about. And I respect that quite a bit. I think it's very creative and thought-provoking and whatnot, so pretty sweet. And we have here the Benny the Butcher collection. We'll start with the first one. This is Plugs I Met. This is a mixtape. Very well done album, or mixtape, I guess. It's real short. I want to say it's less than like 30 minutes. The opening track on here, Crowns for Kings with Black Thought, coming right off of the skit, it's so hard. Like, it's very strong. At least for me, the horns on that are just phenomenal. And there's some other great ones on here too. We've got some production from Alchemist, Derringer, that kind of stuff. He's got Pusha T on this album, so super strong mixtape. Plugs I Met 2 was a good follow-up. I don't quite like it as much as the first one, but still very, very respectable. Also another short one, and it's just a fun one to listen to every now and then. Pretty good example of what you can expect from Griselda, or at least New York underground music at this point, with like the coke rap, that kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a super solid overall album. The last Benny album I have is Tana Talk 4. This was, I think, a 2022 release. Shamefully and admittedly, what put me on this album was the J. Cole verse on Johnny P's Caddy. It's a great verse from J. Cole, and went and listened to the whole album after it released. You're just getting some solid coke rap. I love Tana Talk 3. I can't afford that since it came out before I was collecting vinyl, and the resale is insane, at least by my standards. So I'd love to have Tana Talk 3, but obviously I don't. So this one I looked for a really long time, just to find a decent pressing for, just because I don't know that it's been pressed since it originally came out, but this is MED or Metaphor. Push comes to shove. And this, for me, is like one of the most underrated albums that I have. There's some great Jay Dilla and Madlib production on here. And if you like Madvillainy, you're going to like this. Obviously, very different rapping styles, but production very similar. And can't overstate how much I appreciate this album and how underrated it actually is. And then to round things out, this is the last little bit of my collection, and I'm just gonna pump through these real quick. We've got Childish Gambino, because internet. This is on standard black. We got Kawaii, Childish Gambino. This is the RSD version. It's like this solid light blue color. Paid resale for this before they started mass producing because I thought it was actually only going to be a record store day exclusive. Turns out it wasn't. So paid a lot of extra money for no reason. And even though I do appreciate the album, it's definitely not my favorite. So there's that. And then we have Awaken My Love, Childish Gambino. This is probably my favorite by him. Just the R&B kind of soul sampling and live production on here is immaculate. And I don't think he's ever going to reach this peak again. Primarily because I think he's done releasing music, at least as Childish Gambino. But because this was creatively like his peak. It's just so good. So yeah, that will conclude bin 3. We still have 3 more bins to go. So more to come, obviously, but hope you enjoyed.